It's 40A3. 40A3. So we're going to go to the My Ovrei Avera, right? It says, we said that there was the Ovrei Avera. There were the people that, you know, that this, because we said, the Brisa said, Misharobu over Avera, when there was an increase in the people that sinned, they forbade bathing in the bathhouses of of the cities, the public bathhouses. Sorry, correct myself. When there was an increase in the over Avera, they forbade you to go ahead and take the hot baths. That's the language. The Gemara says, "My over Avera" on 40A3. What does it mean over Avera? What was the people? What was happening? People were sinning. The Omer of Shimon ben Pazim, Rabbi Shmuel Levi Shema Kapara, B'tchilu hoyerochasim b'tchamim shulchan b'erev Shabbos, b'erev Shabbat. In the beginning, they were allowed. The people actually were allowed. It was appropriate. They were allowed. There was no problem to bathe in hot water that was heated up before Shabbat. Right, the hot water was heated up before Shabbat. They're able to go ahead and bathe in that hot water because they didn't heat it up on the Shabbat. It wasn't heated up in a prohibited way. Heated up before Shabbat. They bathed on Shabbat, and of course they had to be careful not to carry the water outside, not to go ahead and squeeze their hair. Whatever they needed to be careful, they were allowed to go ahead and use a bathhouse, a hot bath. But Hischilu habalanim lehecham b'Shabbat. The attendants, the ones who were running the bathhouses, they started heating up the water on Shabbat. Well, Omrim, and they would say me'erev Shabbat ucham. They would say it was heated up before Shabbat. They said it was heated up before Shabbat, and now, but really they were heating it up on Shabbat. And the rabbis discovered that. Well, they forbade people taking hot baths on Shabbat, even though it's heated up before Shabbat, because of these people that were unscrupulous and would actually heat it up on Shabbat and say it was heated up before Shabbat. Good morning, Adam. But they allowed you to go ahead and take a schwitz. They allowed you to go ahead and take a steam bath, meaning not actual bath. Good morning, Mark. And what happened was, the people, good morning, Mark.
Morning again.
Good morning. The people would still wash. The people weren't being honest. They would wash. When you give them the expression, if you give them a finger, sometimes people take a hand or whatever the expression is. So the fact that the people were allowed to take a hot steam bath on Shabbat in the bathhouse with water that was heated up before Shabbat. But what happened was, once you allowed them into the bathhouse area, they rochsim b'chamim. They would wash actually in the hot water, which was not allowed. And omrim, and they would say mezima nachna. We just had to take a hot steam bath. But they didn't take a hot steam bath. They really washed. And on the top of 48.3, top right column. So therefore, the rabbi said, okay, we can't allow you to even do a steam bath on Shabbat because they would be faking it out and saying that they only did a steam bath when they really actually would bathe themselves. So they vetiru b'chamei Tveria, but the rabbis allowed them to wash in the waters of Tveria, the hot waters of Tveria, because it's going with the opinion that the hot waters of Tveria are not heated up by fire. Not the fire of Gehenna that's heating them up, let's say. It's just naturally through the sun or whatever means the waters, the springs of Tveria are hot. So they were allowed to take a bath in the waters of Tveria. But you know what happened? The bath in the waters of Tiberia are not the same as the bath of the waters of regular water. As we know, the waters of Tiberia are not so, you know, they're not so clear, not so clean as like other waters. So people would go ahead. עדיין היו רוכסים, ועדיין היו רוכסים מחמי האור. People in Tiberia itself would go ahead and they would wash themselves, take hot baths in water that was heated up with fire. And what did they say? Omrim b'chamei Tiberia rachatznu. They would say, we are washing with the waters of Tiberia. But it wasn't the waters of Tiberia. It was actually real regular waters, which was heated up, let's say, before Shabbat. But then now to take that hot bath on Shabbat. So when what the rabbis do, Osalem Chamet Tiberia. The rabbis forbade them, you can't use the waters of Tiberia. V'tiru lahen, it's a sonain. They allowed them only to take a cold bath on Shabbat. You can take a cold bath. You can't take a hot bath, whether it's the waters of Tiberia, not waters of Tiberia. But again, once you give them that allowance of the waters of Tiberia, the people weren't being too many. There was enough people that weren't being honest, and they were just making believe they were using the waters of Tiberia, but really, what was it, Adam? They were really using regular water that was heated up before Shabbat, which we had said you can't use that water on Shabbat to take a bath. So the rabbi said, okay, we can't let you use the waters of Tiberia either for a bath. But then, the rabbi saw that this was too much for the people. This is a fascinating concept. If the rabbis make a decree, every time the rabbis make a decree, they only make a decree on something in a way that they feel the community can handle it. But if they see that it's too much for the community, so then the rabbi sometimes would remove their decree. So they can make an enactment, they can create some sort of protection, sort of fence. But if they see that fence is too much for the people, they'll open the fence. So what they saw, that because at this point they had forbade all types of hot water baths, whether Tiberia or non-Tiberia. They had forbade steam baths, just taking a schwitz, because of the people that would say they took a schwitz, but they would actually take the bath. So therefore, when the rabbi saw she'ein hadova omid lahem, this is too much for the people, hitiru lahem b'chamei Tiberia. They allowed them, they allowed them to take a bath in the waters of Tiberia, but in the hot waters of Tiberia. They could take a bath, and it's brought down that specifically if the hot water is like running, is in something that's attached to the ground, not in a movable utensil, because that would be, if they were taking that, then people would make mistakes and taking water that's heated up, not with hot waters of Tiberia. So, but if it's on the ground or it's in something attached to the ground, they allowed them, they allowed them to take baths on Shabbat, hot baths, the hot waters of Tiberia, but they still kept the prohibition of taking a steam bath on the Shabbat. So that's how the Gemara over here ends this point. And then the Gemara says,
it's a little confusing.
Which point, Mark?
Confusing. You're letting them take
a hot bath,
the springs, but they're not allowed to take
with the springs of Tiberia. Right, the springs of Tiberia.
Previously, we said the schwitz was okay because you were going to take. So if I'm not using the springs of Tiberia and I'm somewhere else, I could do a schwitz.
If you're not using it, what was your case?
Then I do cold water after, outside.
Yeah, we're saying
just a few days ago.
Right. Yeah, we're saying now that once the rabbi saw that when we allowed the schwitz, they would go in and they would say, they would actually bathe and say they took a schwitz. That's what they did.
Right. So it's a change of
Right,
direction.
right. There's a change of direction because the people weren't been too many people. Remember, not everybody is a Yirat Shemayim.
Right.
Not everybody, and when it comes to bathing and these type of things, it's very people really enjoy it. Something that's very enjoyable and pleasurable for people.
Right.
And you let them into the room, into the bathhouse. They already start. And again, they're going to rationalize. They're going to say, what's really the big problem? You know, I'm not. The water was heated up before Shabbat. It was not heated up on Shabbat. I'm just using the hot water to wash, to take a bath. So they'll, once you let them in, like I gave an example. Once you allow the cake in the house, when someone's on a diet, once you
Right.
allow the cake in the house, there's rationalization. Why to eat
You're
that
right.
cake?
Right.
I'm hung. I need the strength. I need this. I didn't sleep. I'll walk extra. I'll run extra. Whatever. There's always excuses, rationalization, and therefore people, whatever their rationalization was, they say, oh, maybe it's for their health. They'll start saying they needed the hot water. I don't know. Whatever people will
Right.
rationalize.
Right.
So the rabbi said we can't allow the schwitz, but the rabbi saw that it's too much to tell at least the people in Tveria. It's too much to tell the people in Tveria that they can't that they can't even use the the hot water of Tveria for a bath. That they felt that because because they removed the steam bath from them, they removed the regular hot bath, and now we're removing the springs of Tveria from them to be using. So that they saw was a little bit too much for the people, and therefore they pulled back. Um, so it's interesting that they quote over here that the Gemara in Avodah Zarah uh, learns this from a pasuk. There's actually a verse that teaches us that you can't make a decree on the community unless the majority of the community can handle it. So it's interesting. It's not even that everybody, but if yeah, as long as the mass majority could handle it, and you need to make this. I presume the idea is you need to make certain enactments to protect the community, to guard the community. So even if there are individuals that won't keep it, that doesn't seem to be enough of a reason why not to make the decree. Because as long as you're going to be saving you know, the majority of the community, there might be always individuals that might find certain fences difficult to keep. But as a rabbinate, as you have to would seem that you have, of course, you care about every individual, but you have to, if you want to guard the Torah, you have to make sure that if there's a situation that will help the majority of the community, that the majority of the community could use this fence, and they could handle this fence, and you feel it's necessary for the fence, and you're interested in protecting them, so you make that fence, you make that enactment. I like that, Ezra. That seems to be, but again, they have to watch it. They have to see it if they're able to handle it. So the Gemara now says, Amar Rava. Rava says, Haiman de Avad Rabbanan. Somebody who violates a rabbinic law. Now, what does this mean? He violates rabbinic law. We're now on the bottom of 48.3. You see, the Gemara is going to say, if he violates the rabbinic law, Shari lemikre le avarayana. You could call him a transgressor. What does that mean? So you could call him, you could label him, you could shame him. What are
Hey
we
guys.
talking about? What are we talking about? So obviously, in the laws of
Okay.
Lashon Hara, if a Jew does something wrong, right?
Mhm.
You can't just
I
humiliate
think
him,
they'll leave the tail
shame
picking up.
him, embarrass
Me,
him because he's not keeping Torah,
Adrian.
just because one time he doesn't keep a mitzvah. Obviously, we're talking about a situation
Thank you.
where you spoke to the guy, You try to tell him that, it's not acceptable. He doesn't want to keep rabbinic law. Let's say, I give you an example. You go to you have someone, he goes ahead, in a place where there's an Erev, he carries money with him on Shabbat. He carries his wallet on Shabbat. I like to carry my wallet with me. Now, your wallet is mukseh. You can't be carrying your wallet. Morning, Simon. You can't be carrying your wallet, right, Simon, on Shabbat. We can't carry a wallet, even in a place where there's an Eruv, right? Morning, Mario. We can't carry a wallet. Man. And he says, you know what? I don't, I don't follow rabbinic. I'm not interested with the rabbis. I'm not interested in the fences, he says. I'm not. So he's intentionally showing disrespect. He was told that you can't act this way. And he publicly, let's say, does things that he's not interested in rabbinic law. So that person, we have a concern that other people are going to learn from him. What do you have? What do you say to that, to Adam? That when a person brazenly, openly shows that he's not interested in rabbinic law, so there's a concern that other people shouldn't learn from him, and they should keep a distance in a certain sense from that there's a concern that he's going. That's how the Meiri understands that the idea of calling him out, calling him a transgressor, is not about putting him down. That's not the purpose of that. Morning. The guy is not interested in rabbinic law. And you're gonna call him out, and you can say you're a transgressor, and maybe we'll even tell other people about this guy's a transgressor. What's the point? The point is only because you wanted people not to learn from him. See, they quote over here, this is only talking about a person who does this many times. It shows that he has no fear of Hashem, no yirat shamayim, or he does this sin in public. That everybody already knows about this. That this guy's not interested in rabbinic law. So you have a right. The Gemara says you have a right. Shari lemikra le'avayna. You could call him an avayna. You could call him he's a transgressor. Now, Rava is in sync what he said in Yevamot. Someone who doesn't keep rabbinic law is called a Rasha. Now, the word Rasha is a very big word, right? Where do we use the word Rasha? We use the word Rasha. Moshe Rabbeinu uses someone who lifted his hand to hit his fellow Jew. He raised his hand, he didn't hit him, but he threatened to hit him. He called him what? Rasha lama sakariefa. He called him a what? A Rasha. The Torah says that a Rasha. It's all right. It's all right. It's good. It's good for me to be a little bit. No. It says it calls a person. The Torah said a Rasha can't be a witness, right? Someone's getting married. As Hashem, you can find the right shidduch. If you don't mind me using you as an example, and everybody should keep him in mind also. Ezra and Adam, we got two, right? And they find the right shidduch, and now the two of the most important people at that wedding are the witnesses on the marriage. When you say the words Hariyat Mukadesh Li, you say you're married to me with this ring, you have to have two kosher witnesses. If the witnesses are not kosher, the marriage is not a marriage. So now, if a person there are people that are invalid that can't be a witness. Your relatives, certain relatives can't be witnesses. Stay away from relatives, right? Relatives can't be witnesses. So, but then the Torah also says that a rasha, a wicked person, can't be a witness. Now, what's called wicked in the eyes of the Torah? What kind of person that the Torah labels as wicked? Right. So someone who doesn't keep the Shabbat, but it's even broader than that. It seems anybody who violates Torah law willingly it violates prohibitions that carry with it lashes. Let's say it's not kosher. He keeps Shabbat, but it's not kosher. Or he doesn't say, he doesn't care about shatnez. He knows about shatnez. He was told about shatnez. So I don't keep shatnez. And it carries, meaning that type of, he has to know, if he doesn't know about the law, then it's not intentional. So to my knowledge, that would be an interpret. That's called a rasha. Right, exactly. So he violates but here, right, he violates a prohibition that would carry lashes if he would be warned. But he knows that he's not allowed to go ahead and he was told, he knows about it. He learned about it. He went to yeshiva. He knows he uses a razor on his beard, and he knows he can't use a razor on his beard. But he intentionally uses the razor on the beard. He's invalidated. He not can't be a witness. He keeps Shabbat, Mark. There are people that use razors on their beards and they keep Shabbat. But and they know they should. I like the smooth shave. He said that smooth shave. It's it's like it's like that smooth shave. It's all about the smooth shave. But that guy, it's such a. He said, "I want that smooth shave." See, you know what? He can't be a. When these guys get married, they can't have him as a witness. He can't be. You give him a bracha technically, and if you should give him such an honor, it's difficult. Avad Yosef has a question. Should you give the guy an aliyah on Shabbat? So he says, you know what, if you don't give him an aliyah on Shabbat, you're going to push him away. Maybe he's not going to come to shul. He might not come to shul, right? So the fact that, so maybe better give him the aliyah, bring him close, you know what I mean? Obviously you have to talk to him a certain way, but, try to bring the guy close. But that is so we find that the word Rasha in the Torah by witnesses can't invalidate a witness. That's the definition of Rasha. So here, he's using, so the word Rasha sometimes could mean different things. So Rava holds in Yevamot that even if your guy keeps all the Torah laws, but if he does not keep rabbinic law, he's called a Rasha. There's another, and then he says a beautiful idea. The Meiri says, without rabbinic law, Torah law will not be kept. And if you touch rabbinic law, meaning you don't keep rabbinic law, you're like touching the pupil of the eye, or whatever the expression is, the apple of the eye of the Torah. So that is so the Gemara says, Kiman, Rava, where did Rava learn that he's called someone who violates a rabbinic law is called a violator, a transgressor? So the Gemara says, we turn the page, Ki Haitana. Because the Gemara, it's like our Tana, look at the top Rashi, top left corner. Ki Haitana. The Tana, the Amalael that said earlier, when the sinners began, when they began going ahead and taking baths and saying they took a schwitz, morning. So what happened? They started forbidding the steam bath on Shabbat. But what was the problem? Because they are what is the sin that they're doing? The people that said they went for a schwitz, but really they went for a hot bath. They used water that was heated up the day before, and they said we took a schwitz. There's only a rabbinic prohibition of using hot water, taking a bath in hot water that was heated up before Shabbat, and yet we call them uvrei avera. They're the people that transgress sin. We didn't just say the people started taking the hot bath and saying they took a schwitz. They said they were labeled. The Gemara, the Tana labeled, generally tell people try not to label people, right? Try not to label communities. But the Tana labeled these people that took a hot bath, and they said they took a hot steam bath, but they really took a real hot water bath. they were referred to as Ovre Avera, people who sinners. So therefore, he learns from there that they're labeled, that the Gemara gives them a label, and you could give those people a label. I know we live in times everyone's very soft and very, but the Gemara, we live in a soft time, politically correct times, right? But really, the Gemara, I'm not saying that you're supposed to be politically correct. You have to know what you're supposed to do the right thing, right, Mark? But the Gemara refers to them as Ovrei Avera. They're labeled because, and what's the concern? We're not, it's I love this Meiri. It's not about we want to label Morris sinners because we want to, call them out just to call them out. It's more, it seems like the main reason why to call them out, Adam, that we shouldn't learn from them. Your children, your brothers, your sisters, your family, your relatives shouldn't see this what? Yeah, but by calling them out as sinners, I don't know how much you try to bring them back before you call them out. But it seems I don't know how much you're gonna. Sometimes maybe they will out of embarrassment they will come back, like you said. It's possible, but it seems like the major concern is we don't want other people to learn from them. When people do what they want and nobody says nothing and they get away with it and nobody calls them out, it becomes the norm. We see what happened to society, right? Simon's shaking his head. Right. But if we don't call people out and we just let them do, then what happened to the other kids? This guy's doing drugs and no one calls him out, and he keeps on doing drugs and nobody calls him out. And you spoke to the guy and he doesn't want to take care of it. He doesn't want to go for therapy. I'm not saying you should call him out. I'm just saying to understand. But you know what I'm saying? I'm saying that he's doing drugs and there's kids in the class and everybody's going to be learning from the kids. Okay, I'm not giving every situation, right? Morris has to be very carefully because you don't want to ruin the guy. Also, what I'm saying? You have to know what everything has to be. But the point is, you have to also protect the other Jewish community from guys who could be a very negative influence. We all know everybody's influenced from everybody else. That seems to be the issue here, to protect the community. Again, also everything might be different between teenagers, adults. Teenagers are their own world in itself. You know what I'm saying? People make mistakes as teenagers. It doesn't mean you got to label them openly. Also, what I'm saying? You have to know. Everyone has to know every situation. You have to speak to wise people of great experience to be able to direct you how to deal with a situation when someone's conducting himself in a certain way, and how the other kids. We all know when I have a student of mine, how did he get into drugs, right? He got into drugs because his friend introduced him to drugs. What he told me. He didn't get into drugs. One day he went to looking for drugs. That's not how he got into drugs. But some people that look for drugs, they wanted drugs. He said his friend gave him, offered him drugs. That's how he got drugs. That was the problem. Thank God he's doing better. I'll tell you. Gotta be positive, right, Mark? Thank God he's doing better today. Okay. The Gemara continues. We're on the top of 40b1. Amvatio shel krachim. The Gemara says an interesting allowance. The Gemara says over here. If you have the bathhouses of the big cities, the big city bathhouses were very large, and the Gemara says, the Breita says, Mitayo Behem. The Breita says you're allowed to walk, if you want to walk in there on the Shabbat, but you're not going for the purpose of schwitzing. You're not going for the purpose, it's a nice place, it's airy, whatever it is, you want to go there on Shabbat. You could go into that structure where the baths are. It's not Maradayan, right? And you don't have to be concerned that people are going to think that you went ahead and you went to Schwitz, because people like to walk in there. They walk through, Amar Rava. Rava says that's only Dafka Krachim. That's only it's a bathhouse in the cities, the major bathhouses. So when you walk in, it's not enough to really get a real schwitz, unless you really must probably spend time there. But of all tikfarim in the villages, the bathhouses in the villages are much smaller, and the heat is much more intense. It's not so airy, and therefore, if you go in there, it's much like you're getting a steam bath, whether you like it or not. More likely you're getting a steam bath. Low. You can't even if you're not doing it for the purpose of steam bath, but the fact is, you're going to get that. It's like the guy says, I
You always say, if you think you could do this, then I think I could do that. So if I spend my whole life in a large city and I've been walking through Sweden during the time, and I move to, or for the weekend, I go to a small city, I'm going to think I could go through that.
right. So therefore, you're correct. That's why where there's a big problem. People who live in communities that have an A roof, and they grew up their whole life in Teaneck and Englewood or whatever, and then they move to other places where there's no A roof. They go to England, and wherever they're going, whether if they, let's say Manhattan, according to the opinion, say you can't carry in. Rav Moshe Feinstein said you can't carry in Manhattan. So if a guy was brought up in Englewood, and he's a student of Rav Moshe Feinstein, his family follows Rav Moshe Feinstein's laws, right? And then he goes ahead and he moves to the city. He never knew there's an issue of carrying on Shabbat. And you go out of the country, you go out of the state. People are spoiled in New York, New Jersey. We have a Reuven. And anywhere you go, it's not a heavily populated area of real strong Jewish community. Then it takes an effort. There's no way, right? Right. In New Orleans, they made it because there's a Jewish community there. So,
Yeah, not everyone. It's the same thing, though. Not everyone's good.
but a lot of the Erev, if the small cities, the small places, usually Erev are pretty good. You know what I'm saying? It's much less issue. The big issues are the big places like Manhattan. There's also smaller compared. It's not as a big of an issue. 600,000 people that live that can walk and go in that area per day. That can walk into that street. They don't have to actually walk in, but they have the ability to walk. Or actually go in those streets. You have to look up exactly the halacha, but there's 600,000 people that are in that area that they use that street, right? Every person. Brooklyn's a problem. Manhattan's a problem. Again, there are some rabbis, right? Because there are some Hasidic rabbis that were lenient. And they said, because back in the old home, they had Eruvin, therefore they like to keep it over here as well. And they have reasons why but Ramosha Feinstein said they can't. There's different rabbis, whatever, you know. But the bottom line is, you're right, it is a problem. When you're used to something, people don't realize what the reason is. No, listen, it applies over here is that meaning we don't say.
You're doing that all over. This whole thing revolves around. So I think I could do it here, then I think I could do that. So in order to make sure you can't do that, I'm not going to let you do this. So how are they letting them do this?
Right. Because again, remember, they saw the problem with the hot water. Good morning, Sally. The problem was they saw that the people they allowed the schwitz, but they didn't allow the hot water bath. And then they see people taking the hot water bath and they're playing games, right? It wasn't working. The allowance wasn't working. They didn't just say no. Originally, they didn't say no schwitz, no steam, and no hot water. They didn't do that. They took stages. They first forbade hot water taking the bath, but then they saw people playing games. So they're not going to say don't make an Erev in Englewood because you're going to go live somewhere else. You could go live somewhere else. But maybe if they would see that when the people live somewhere else, maybe but it's a hard thing for the rabbis to forbade an area of an Englewood because people. Okay, yes, but it's hard when people finish in Englewood, they say don't make an area of an Englewood because they're going to go ahead and it's hard to do. It's hard to forbade that, So that's the logic. I want to wish everyone. Time flies when you're having fun, everybody. Right, Simon? Feels like 5 minutes. No, Adam? Have a great day, everybody. Asaf, have a great day.